committed to free speech, consent, upbeat and entertaining.
Heartfelt and passionate.
Hello and welcome to The Pledge. French President Emmanuel Macron has been in America this week, hanging out with his new best buddy, Donald Trump. It's been impossible to avoid their burgeoning bromance. The pair were captured holding hands, sharing a hug, exchanging a kiss, having a drink. And Mr. Trump even removed a piece of dandruff from Monsieur Macron's shoulder to, in his words, make him perfect. But let's be honest, many people who work together are affectionate towards each other. Carol and Greg always greet each other with a peck on the cheek. June is always giving Michelle a hug. I even used to brush the dandruff off Greg's shoulder. But, of course, you do need hair for that, so I haven't done it since the early 80s. Coming up on this week's programme, Michelle says it's time to accept we need ID cards. June tells us to back away from the bottle. Greg thinks the Windrush scandal spells trouble for the government's Brexit plans. And Carol calls out Meghan Markle on her choice of wedding guests. But first, it's me. Now, last week marked 25 years since a gang of racist thugs murdered Stephen Lawrence. Britain has come a long way since, with much of the travelling being done by the police. Truth be told, they did have a lot of distance to make up. Some, not all, practices and attitudes seem to belong to the American Deep South rather than a nation supposedly famed for its sense of tolerance. But the police have changed, and that is why the comments made by the usually learned Archbishop of York, Dr. John Sentamu, are unhelpful and deeply unfair. He said the report after Lawrence's murder that said the police were institutionally racist needed to be, and I quote, revisited by every police service so that they learn the lessons. That's insulting to everyone brave enough to currently serve as a police officer. He's saying racism is normalised and established in today's police. Yes, they have issues, like other large organisations, but they have striven to put right vile wrongs. And the Archbishop is utterly misguided to reignite this unholy row.
Nick, I totally see where you're coming from to a point. I do think things have improved in the 25 years since the Macpherson report. But I think if you ask particularly any man of colour, what it feels like to be somebody that is constantly stopped, where the assumption is that you are guilty. And if you look at the statistics, black people or people of colour, being me, are 8 times more likely to be stopped than white people and less likely to be carrying drugs, actually. So I think I get where you're coming from, but in terms of the lived experience of the people this affects, I would say the majority of them would agree with the Archbishop of York.
Because to be institutionally racist, as I'm sure you're... And it's really important it is to say effectively that it is absolutely normalised with the institution. And the blokes and women who got up this morning and who'll go and get up tomorrow morning, accept that racism is in... That is what it means, is in the fabric of their organisation. Now, have they still got issues?
There are practices that are the norm within that institution that yield racist results. That's what it's saying.
What's
so your
racist...
intention might not be...
What practices?
Stop. Black people being 8 times more likely to be stopped.
What's a
That's
racist...
all I need to say.
I'll bring you in. What is a racist result, June?
Black people being 8 times... People of colour being 8 times
But lastly,
more likely
before I throw it open, if you talk about a city like London...
when they are less likely to have drugs or firearms or whatever it is they're being...
Well, that's where I would have to challenge you, because if you look at the possession of firearms and knives... Drugs is an interesting one, because there is an enormous problem with white males with drugs, and county lines and white kids carry... But if you look at possession of knives and guns, you will accept...
London...
Yeah, but you will accept that that is a problem within the black community.
No, I would accept that that is a problem within a specific group that are part of the black community in London.
But when
That's
you look at the pictures of those
nationwide.
tragic victims, more than 80% of the 60+ who've been killed in London are non-whites.
I'm accepting that.
OK, fine,
Yeah.
OK. Carol.
Let's just have a look at what the Archbishop actually said.
If you stereotype people, you end up disadvantaging them, and I think the insidious thing about it is that because people may be white, you assume they're guiltless, and when they're black, you assume they must be guilty. So how you get this out of an organisation requires clear vigilance.
See, what interests me about that is I don't think he did say that they were institutionally racist.
He said it needed to be reviewed.
Yes,
Yeah.
but I don't think he said that they were institutionally racist. My own experience, as I tend to agree with you, that I think there's been a massive change.
For sure.
I remember when I was when I was running the BBC, I was invited by John Stevens, who was then running the Met, to go and talk. I'd invited him to talk to our senior management. He invited me to go and talk to theirs. What was interesting to me was not what I was saying, but it was what he was saying. He basically said to them, I won't put up with this. Talking about race, I won't put up with this. And I think there's been a massive change at the top.
I agree.
Whether that's changed, how much that's changed down below, I don't know.
A lot of distance has been travelled. There are still issues. I'm not pretending they're not. Carol Malone.
I think Macpherson produced some very positive change. And I think the question we have to ask ourselves 20 years on is... 25 years on, sorry. Is, would the police today deal differently with the murder of Stephen Lawrence? And I think they absolutely would deal differently. So massive changes has been made. What I think was that every few years, some organisation damaged the police again. Every 5, 10 years. The Runnymede Trust did it 10 years ago, and the Black Police Officers Association did it recently too, as well as the Archbishop.
From him in a minute.
Yeah. But you know, what you do here is it's a mass defamation of every police force in this country, and it's demoralising to all our policemen who I think have changed hugely to have to work under this banner now of being racist. You know, I don't believe they are racist. You know, many people many years ago, when the inquiry was happening, didn't believe the police were institutionally racist then. There were voices at the time that were saying the police weren't institutionally racist, but institutionally incompetent in the way they handled the Stephen Lawrence inquiry. And the only conclusion they could come to at the end of it, was that because he was black, it had to be racist. And that did defame every police force in this country.
We'll bring Michelle in a second. Let's just hear, you want to come in after this, and one of the relevant quotes from the association.
This is from Tola Munro, president of the National Black Police Association. And Tola says, I think there has been some progress, and I'm grateful for the progress and the increasing number of BME officers. But if I was marking policing, I would give us a C at the moment. We within the NBPA would argue that we would consider at least some forces are institutional.
Can I just come back
in a sentence, because I want to get
Michelle I just want to say the police officers, Black Police Officers Association is saying that because there aren't the same equivalent percentage numbers in the force of BME as there are in the population, that means it's racist. But you know, we've got to look at the fact that that's one of the things they said. But we've got to accept that a lot of black people don't want to join the police force. There's recruiting drives in every police force, and the numbers aren't there. They don't want to join. That's what we should be looking at.
Michelle.
Well, I agree with Carol to a degree in terms of I think it must be quite demoralising if you're just a good person that's joined the police force to do good, to be told, you know, institutional racism still exists in what you're doing. That must really demoralise you, and I don't actually think that that's the case anyway. And I think that sometimes I wonder if we're so afraid of being seen as institutional racists. When I think of things like Rochdale, Telford and all the rest of it, I wonder sometimes if we've gone too far the opposite direction.
These are the child grooming scandals, just to remind the viewers what we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. So that makes me wonder if we've gone too far the opposite direction. However, I do have a 15-year-old mixed-race godson, and when I talk to him, he tells me that he does still worry about things like stop and search, etc., because of his skin colour. So obviously things are not perfect, and there is still some work to be done.
Greg, you made a really good point there. That he's saying that people are ethnic minorities were treated with kid gloves. One of the accusations after Macpherson was the police officer on the ground was so paralysed by fear of going near ethnic minority people that they turned a blind eye to crime.
Figures don't suggest that at all.
This was Rochdale and Rotherham, June. They turned a blind eye.
Let's move it away from policing to another area just briefly. When you were running the BBC, you got a lot of controversy because you were determined to try and change that. How successful were you?
We made some progress. Whether it's still there, I don't know. I haven't seen this.
Why was it important to do it?
We made some... Why was it important to do it? Because I think institutions need to reflect the society they're serving, is the truth. And if you looked at... The figures were actually much worse than people understand, because most of the BBC centres are in big cities, where so you take the national figures, but they're not relevant. It's the relevant of the population in that city.
So what did you do? How did you try and fix it?
Oh, he did a lot.
I did a lot, but I basically set up a kangaroo court, I'll be honest, and we just, every 3 months we would have heads of departments in and say, your figures aren't changing, why not? And over time they change.
How long were they given? How long was a department head given to put it right?
Oh, yeah.
But what happens if you're in the police
I mean,
force?
we were lucky, though. I mean, you remember, this is a time of expansion. It's much harder when an organisation is cutting back.
Do you think black people don't want to join?
What happens if people
Let's
don't
just
want to
explore a
join?
point. Do you think black kids, men and women, want to join the police?
I don't think you can generalise like that. I think at the end of the day, it's like anything. You've got to look at any profession that has a low percentage of whatever group, and you've got to look at how do you source talent from that community? What are you doing to reach that community? So I don't think it's a...
But let me just say, there's an inspector in West York's police called Tanya Wilkins, and she said that when she joined, when she was going to join, her family begged her not to, but her community isolated her. They called her a sellout and a coconut because she was a black person joining the force. And so do you not think that's still around? I think it is, because there are recruiting drives.
I had the privilege to do the last but one. I took the passing out parade of Met Police candidates at Hendon, the last but one on now Lord Hogan-Howe's report, so he's the preceding commissioner, and you walk down the ranks. I don't know, you might have done it, Greg. It's a tremendous honour to do it. It was to see London. There was every single colour. They couldn't have worked harder at non-white representation, truly.
And can I just add to that? This isn't a problem in America. America has no problem recruiting police officers from black and ethnic communities. So we just need to look at what is it that they're doing that works that maybe we're not doing here.
Right, well, I'm going to keep this simple. Story after story in the news this week has made one thing certain in my mind. It is time to bring back and properly introduce ID cards into the UK. Having these would likely have prevented the Windrush fiasco and would help vulnerable folk like homeless teenager Ryan Abrahams, whose story I watched earlier this week. ID cards keep things simple. They show who we are, what we're entitled to, can even give information on life-threatening allergies that we have. In fact, the list goes on. Technology has now advanced, and it's time we use it.
OK, are you talking about a voluntary scheme or a compulsory scheme?
Left to my own devices, I'd prefer the latter. Because I think that if you...
So I'm one of the Windrush kids, and I go along and...
I don't think you are, Greg.
Yeah.
I mean,
I'd tell you straight out.
I'm asking you to pretend. So I'm one of the Windrush kids. I go along,
yeah,
and I have to register.
Yeah.
And they say, sorry, you're not a British citizen. What do you then do?
Well, no, what I would...
I'll tell you what happens. And if they then take action against them, no one else is going to register.
No, that's true.
Yes, for sure.
No one else is going to register. So I don't think it does what you think it would do. You can't compulsorily make people go along and register, especially if they think there's any doubts about their citizenship.
No, but what you would do, for example, if you had a properly implemented ID system, you could do away with various different current ID forms. So, for example, one might argue that you don't necessarily need to use your driving licence in the same way. You may not, over time, need to use your passport in the same way. So what you would do is say, actually, we're moving to a system where this is your primary form of ID. So in the case of a Windrush situation, you would, when you're establishing this card, you can absolutely see that Greg Dyke has worked. And I know you're about to explode, so I'll speed up. You'd be able to see Greg Dyke has worked, he's paid his taxes, he's had a mortgage or whatever, so you're absolutely in this country.
But I'm one of the Windrush kids, and they go, and the first thing they do is they look at it and say, hang on, you're not entitled to be here.
Yeah. But they are entitled to be here. We've cleared that up.
No, we haven't.
But doesn't it all depend on the type of card that you have? If you have a basic card with your name, age and address and when you were born, that's fine. But it wouldn't be that kind of card now. It would be a card, and I don't know the proper phrase, but it would be biometric this and smart card that. It would be everything. And when the last identity card was going to be introduced, remember the ID Card Act in 2006, there were 50 different forms of info that they could keep on the National Register about you. I didn't know there's 50 different kinds of information about anybody, but it means that the state could trawl through your life, through your privacy, through every private aspect of your life whenever they wanted. And just imagine, if you needed it to do everything, imagine what would happen if the state took the card off you. You can't operate in society anymore. I used to agree with ID cards, but the kind of ID card that would be produced now, I think, would not be good for anybody.
Well, Nick's about to blow a gasket.
Wait a minute. when David Davis was the Shadow Home Secretary, he said
yes, I saw
the Home Secretary's proposals represent a fundamental shift in the balance of power between the citizen and the state.
Yeah. Right,
and I think that sums it up.
Before I bring Nick in, I just want to play you the clip of Ryan, and then you can come back in.
Ryan Abrahams is 19. Not only has he been unable to find homelessness support, but when it comes to benefits, his circumstances mean he cannot even access the system, let alone make a claim.
I've not got an address, I've not got a bank account, I've not even got ID.
You see, they expect people to have all those things. How can he get a bank account without ID? You know? How can he do that? It's just impossible, isn't it? That people like this lovely young man are falling through the cracks of the system.
See that? And that clip goes on, and that lad's in tears. And the amount of times I've cried watching that clip, it really affects me. And when I look at stuff like that and I see the cases of Windrush, etc., it reinforces in me ID is the right thing.
Well, I need to, because we need to have a reply on the video we just saw. Let's hear from Employment Minister Alok Sharma.
In the case of that young man, that 19-year-old, it is the case that he would be able to access benefits without having his ID. That is absolutely possible.
Michelle, can I call you Dubes?
You can call me whatever you want, my friend.
Your business is on the very cutting edge of technology and new developments. You were into bitcoins before I even knew the word. Why do you want to take us back to the 1950s? 1952 is when, point one, Dubes, you are a prominent Brexiteer. We are one of only 3 countries in Europe where you don't have to produce identity cards. So you're taking us back to the 50s and back to the European Union. If you want a card, guess what? When we're all born, we're given an NHS card. And when you qualify for citizenship, you're given an NHS card. If you're so determined that we have to carry another piece of plastic, then just make the NHS card and call it an NHS/ID card. But honestly, I think you're spinning your wheels. They've looked at this with commissions and inquiries, and it's gone nowhere.
Yeah. David Cameron said a long time ago, when he was in power, about ID cards, he said, you know, yes, there's this big database, but you can trust us with the database. No, we can't. No, we can't. We've seen all the leaks and hacks since then.
I don't want to take anyone back to the 50s, by the way, just so you know. 52. And I'm a massive advocate of technology, so I don't propose that people necessarily need to wander around with bits of card. I've got some ID cards for you, by the way, as well.
Oh, here we go.
Just before I bring June into this, but there you go, there's one for you.
Thank
you can wander around with it.
There'll be something rude on these, won't there?
There's not going to be anything rude on there. I'm a nice girl.
It says genius.
It doesn't a bit.
No, these are just very simple ones.
In fact, it's got my date of birth, which is bad enough.
My picture makes me look like Adolf Hitler or something.
But I found that interesting.
Well, that's a distinct improvement, mate.
Oh, God, you look tough.
But you just said it's got your date of birth on that's insulting.
Yeah. No, I'm joking.
But that's...
How dare you? Got that date of birth. A load of rubbish.
A swift Google gives me your date of birth.
A card wouldn't just have that, would it?
No.
It would have, if you had a criminal conviction, it would have your marital status.
Terrible.
It would have
details
of your finances, everything.
What do you think?
The state have total
it's a
control.
terrible idea, and we've had this discussion a few times, and I totally disagree. And also, I think, you know, in times of emergency, you know, Nick was talking about 1952, we had ID cards during the Second World War because we needed them. We don't need them anymore. And with all the things that you're talking about, it's not as if France is any more efficient than we are on these issues. They have ID cards. It's a hot mess. So to me, I think there's no point to this stuff. As Carol said, you cannot trust who ends up with this information. I think we're fine as well.
And also the big reasons they put through for the things that will cure things like terrorism, it doesn't.
It doesn't.
It doesn't.
They still have as many
countries that have compulsory cards, Germany and Belgium, have been hit by terrorism, as has Spain. So it doesn't protect you from any of the things they say it will.
But a lot of your information is already out there. I mean, so much information.
So why do I want it out there more?
Because it's not in a controlled,
precisely why I don't
system.
want that.
And actually, I have no problem with my life being made easier. So, for example, if I'm, I don't know, 18, 19, I want to go and buy some alcohol. Have you got your ID? Yes, I have. It's on my smartphone. It's my ID system. There you go. I don't know if I'm going to the doctors or wherever. Have you got your...
after buying the alcohol, you probably
Yeah.
need.
Have I got my information?
Yeah.
Yes, there you go. If I'm
What
going to
happens
go
if
and
you
get
had
my...
a shady past and you wanted to forget that and hide it? What, that would be on your ID.
Well, if I've got a shady past, I need to, you know, accept the fact I've done wrong and live with the
But you
consequences
shouldn't
of
have
that.
to live
Shouldn't
with it
have
for
to.
the rest of
Yes,
your
exactly.
life if you've done your time.
But you wouldn't. So convictions, I mean, we're going off topic a little bit, but convictions are spent, and when things are spent, they don't always appear on your record. So that's
having a different record.
that's a
What
different-
you're
No. When convictions are spent, they're not on your record still.
Anyway, I need to...
So basically, I've not convinced any of you.
Not
Should
one.
I just go home?
No, you stay.
Only if you've got your security card on you.
Forget
Yeah.
this topic. Nick, you mentioned a moment ago about needing to go to the doctor
did.
because of drinking too much. Well, that is my topic. So, I have been teetotal my whole life, which for someone who works in TV is a complete contradiction. We know heavy drinking is linked to health complications and social problems. Yet, it's an area politicians are petrified of even attempting to address. I believe it's time they tackle our obsession with alcohol. Many argue that a pint of beer or a bottle of wine is part of our culture. Well, so was smoking. And as controversial as the smoking ban was, we can't deny the shift in image of smokers from cool cat to outsider. Of course, drinking in public doesn't have the same impact as passive smoking, but it still affects us through increased strain on the NHS or the destruction of families caused from addiction. Our acceptance of drinking alcohol as an integral part of our culture makes it easier for us to slip into excess. So, as a teetotaler, I know this is not going to be popular, but I'm calling time on the British obsession with drinking.
No, I just have to say to you, some of the best times of my life have been spent in bars, in clubs, in pubs, drinking wine and Prosecco with my friends. And I don't ever want it to become socially acceptable. And yes, I get the fact that you know, being in a drunken stupor is not a good place to be. And I get the fact if you drink too much, it's not good for you. But I don't want drinking to become socially acceptable because it isn't like smoking in the sense if you're having a quiet drink in a bar or whatever, you're not affecting everyone around you unless you're shouting the odds and punching people, which most people aren't. And that's a fact. And, you know, people keep on saying there's this trend now amongst young people that they think drinking is stupid. You know, last weekend, the sun came out for the first time and all you could see all over London were people on the streets drinking, having a good time. My supermarket was empty of rosé in the first hour of opening.
That was just you, Karen.
That was just me. But there was a queue in Majestic at 10 o'clock last Saturday morning. People are not... But, and we have to stop thinking that, you know, I, like you, thought drinking was a strain on the NHS. You know, people and the problems related to it. And I just read a report from the Institute of Economic Affairs in 2017. Listen to this. Government spends $4 billion a year on alcohol-related problems and illnesses, so like healthcare, policing, criminal activities. Yep. They make in taxes $10+ billion. Yeah. So we're subsidising us drinkers, teetotalers like you, in society. And actually the same with smokers. You know, they subsidise the economy to the tune of $14 billion. That's... So that rather than being a drain, they're contributing.
No, but are we saying that because of money, it's worth the health problems that it's causing? And also, just to be clear, I'm not in any way saying we need to ban drinking. You know, I'm not for prohibition or anything like that. All I'm saying is that I think British culture, having lived in America, where people drink, but not to the same degree as Brits. So, i.e. in America, if you're having a proper drink at lunch, people look at you as if you're weird.
If you ask for a bottle of wine,
they're like, what?
Can I have a bottle of wine? And she wanted a glass, I want a bottle. She wanted a bottle?
Oh, yeah, a bottle, a whole bottle. And I just think that actually, if there's a way to change behaviour so that people drink in moderation, and we don't have the same sort of excessive behaviour.
But most people do drink in moderation, and I actually think drinking when you're...
I love how you're pointing at me.
No, but a lot of people look at moderation as quite large numbers in terms of what is considered the sort of healthy, safe.
I did look at these figures and said like 18 drinks a week can cut 5 years
off your life.
So you're in big trouble.
Yeah, you're in big trouble. You're off. Go on, Michelle.
I drink.
I know you do.
I drink.
It's a revelation.
I drink. That's something we don't know.
I drink too much, and it makes me uncomfortable. And I drink too much because that is the social circle that I am in. If I go and meet my friends, we go to the pub, or we go for dinner and we drink wine, or if I go and have a meeting in the afternoon, we have a glass of wine or whatever it is. But I do actually think...
And there's pressure on you. If you say, oh, I don't fancy drinking today, your friends will put pressure on you to drink. Go on, have a drink, have a drink.
But you're tough, you can say no.
I can. I very rarely, but but I think that there is this big movement, because if I show you... So this is a clip of me. I'm the one in the pink wig.
All right.
So let me see.
Oh, my gosh.
Let me explain what's going on there.
Well, we can
I don't think you need any explanation.
Is that right-wing Bible class you go to?
That was approximately 2 weeks ago.
Oh, my God.
That was at 7 a.m. in the morning.
Oh, no.
And it was a sober rave. No drink.
Oh, wow.
No drugs.
Oh, my goodness.
Everything was 100% clean, and it's this new movement. You go to the nightclub, it was the Ministry of Sound.
Did they invite you?
No, you buy a ticket.
But
you buy a ticket. It starts at 6:30 in the morning, and I turned up to this event. I fancy dress and all the rest of it, and I turned up. And as soon as I heard the DJ, I was like, right, where's the bar? Even though it was 7, because it's an instinctive thing in your head. Where's this music? And actually, there is no bar. They have green juices, they have smoothies, they have meditation, they have yoga, they have water. And now let me tell you, because I always thought to dance and all the rest of it, I needed to be drunk.
Yeah.
I spent 4 hours on the stage. I was on my own, dancing.
Having
I had
a great
the time
and you
of my
remembered
life.
it.
And I remembered it.
You remembered
And I
it.
went to work later on in the morning. I was all excited and pumped up. I loved it.
I think
Go on, Greg.
I agree with you to an extent.
Okay, all right.
In the sense that, I mean, I look back to my father's generation. I mean, my father, we used to get a bottle of gin at Christmas, and the next Christmas, it was still the same bottle of gin. You know? And I look at my generation, and that's not what happens.
No.
I mean, people have drunk a lot more. I was in Sweden a couple of weeks ago, and in Sweden it's quite hard, outside of bars, it's quite hard to buy alcohol. You go to alcohol shops, and that's it. And that was a policy put in by the Swedish government to actually, and it has reduced people's drinking alcohol
consumption.
I mean, I think the figure shows that there's about 19%, I think, who are like you, who never drink of this country.
Yeah.
So 80% do.
Yes.
Basically.
And of that 80%, probably, I'd be interested to see how many of that 80% drink a lot.
And actually, what is interesting about your comparison with smoking, I mean, smoking has come way... I mean, we're down to 20% smoking now, whereas at one time... I mean, you were in the newspaper.
Oh, everybody.
Everybody smoked.
Great fug would hang over.
Well, you couldn't see across the news desk, could you, because of the amount of smoke coming out. But, and therefore, where I agree with you a bit is that we've probably got to change the balance and encourage...
But what do you want to do in practical terms? What is it
Well, I think in practical terms, so one of the first things would be to change what is seen as socially acceptable. So, i.e., if you look at the smoking ban, just changing legislation so that it just was, you weren't able to smoke inside anymore.
So what, you saying you can't drink inside?
No, I'm not saying you can't drink inside anymore, but I think something like what Greg just talked about with the Swedish model, in terms of making it harder to buy alcohol, because actually that's how the majority of people get alcohol in this country, is that they buy it themselves as opposed to sort of wholesale.
The trouble is, the whole of the British social life has been
and I think that needs to change.
Well, I don't know if it does, because providing you're responsible with it and providing you're not in a stupor every day.
Okay, can I just tiny stat? So from 2015 to 2016, there were 1.1 million hospital admissions related to alcohol consumption, and that's up 4% from the year before. So,
but we know where that's coming from. That's young kids on a Friday and Saturday night in towns and
But if
that's
we changed what was socially acceptable, they would change. You wouldn't have as much of that. I'm using the American example.
Stuff like I've just been to, like that event.
It's great.
There's more and more of those kind of things.
And millennials are changing. They want coffee shops and juice bars. Go on, you.
Well, I was just...
As someone who does drink 18...
Yeah, no, well, I don't know. I don't count. I lost count. No, I tell you what I always... I once had a medical, and the guy asked me, the doctor said, you know, how much do you drink? So I told him, he said, well, my maxim, as long as you don't drink as much as your doctor, you're probably going to be all right, and you're not drinking as much as me. Thank you, doctor, I'll stay with you. But thousands of people get admitted to hospital with fishing injuries.
Yes.
Right? We're not going to ban fishing, are we? No. So why can't we let this... Just because the hospital admissions... your argument's just false.
We can regulate.
Loads of blokes break their leg playing football on a Sunday afternoon on the marshes. We're not going to stop...
Socially unacceptable. It's lovely having a...
There is a long-term problem of sclerosis and the rest.
Yes.
I mean, there is quite clearly something has changed.
Something's got to give.
And somehow, how do you guide a society back a bit the other way without becoming authoritarian and saying, you are not allowed to do this?
Yeah, and can I give you an alternative? Then to give us that story to lift the mood. So I want to show you a quick clip of founder of Seedlip, a guy called Ben Branson, and this is a new distilled non-alcoholic spirit. So you feel like you're drinking, but you're not. Let's have a look.
We're really seeing a change, both in the way that bars, restaurants and the hotel industry are approaching their non-alcoholic cocktail programs, but also in the way that consumers and the public are responding to this and actually demanding better options because for whatever reason they're not drinking and actually they want something that's full of flavour.
I attempted dry January, and when I said at the bar, look, have you got anything that'll make me feel like I'm drinking, they suggested this product. And I don't mean to be mean, I'm sure many people like it, but to me, I felt like I was drinking pot puree water. It wasn't, it was not for me.
How long did your dry January
last? 4 days.
Well done.
Thank
30
you.
years ago, when I was here with a load of other blokes setting up Sky News, I won't name him, but a very, very senior bloke who drank really heavy, put me to shame, suddenly decided he'd become teetotal. After a few months, I said to him, so what's it like? How's it coming? He said, well, I'll tell you what I've learned. There are 2 halves to news at 10. Every night he fell asleep at 10:15.
All right, coming up after the break, why I think the Windrush cases could spell trouble for Brexit. The scandalous Windrush saga has demonstrated that the Home Office simply isn't fit to be left in charge of who comes in and who goes out of this country. Anyone who's dealt with the department on immigration issues knows what a slow, bureaucratic, hostile culture exists within it. Just go and talk with anyone who wants to get married to, and I'll say it slowly, a foreigner, and you'll discover just how hostile the Home Office is. Now, all that's before Brexit, so God only knows what it will be like afterwards. Whole industries like transport, health, hospitality and agriculture, to name but 4, will rely on European workers. And they could be left in total crisis as the Home Office dithers over who can come in and who can't, even on short-term licences. The Windrush saga has shown the government needs to urgently review its plans for what will happen less than a year from now when we officially leave the EU. Promises about who can stay, depending on when they arrived, are likely to be meaningless.
Well, I must say, Greg, I do agree with your concerns, and I talk to a lot of different businesses about how they're preparing for Brexit and what their concerns are. And more often than not, people are talking about access to talent. How are they actually going to be able to get the access to the people that they need to hire? And you've got to make sure that actually, you know, we've got some form of system that people can trust in and actually trust that it's going to work, it's going to be effective and it's going to be efficient. And I do actually have concerns about whether enough thought has been put into this and there's enough progress being made and whether or not we're going to be ready to deliver, because I know that there's conversations about cutting-edge technology this and, you know, simpler than, was it LK Bennett online account?
Online,
Which I thought was, I've never set up
Amber Rudd's line, as easy to us for setting up an online account at LK Bennett's, the well-known sister of course, Gordon and Alan's.
Yeah, which I've never set up an online account for LK Bennett, so I can't say how easy that is or isn't. But I do share your concern that we're perhaps not going to be as ready as we would need to. And what I would like to see, and I don't understand why this government doesn't seem to do this more, is I don't understand why they're not bringing together some bright minds of business and technology minds to look at how are we going to fix and how are we going to prepare ourselves going forward post-Brexit.
I mean, there are currently, I think, 3.7 million EU residents who are who aren't British and haven't got British passports. Now, there's been quite a significant increase in the numbers applying, but that's only from 15 to be British, to have a British passport. That's gone up from, I think, just somewhere near 15,000 to somewhere near 30,000. But, I mean, who's to say when those 3.7 million people came? We're saying they've got to be 5 years. And what's interesting is, which I didn't know, is that for the next 3 years, basically, anyone coming in, as long as they stay 5 years after that, they'll be entitled to stay. And I presume that people coming in now will make it clear that that's when they came. But, I mean, I've talked to so many non-Brits who are Europeans who have no idea what's happening. I mean, it's chaos.
One of the lessons I think Windrush has taught us all is that we should never underestimate how incompetent and how ill-informed many of our ministers are, and particularly the people in the Home Office. I mean, I think Amber Rudd currently is lucky to have a job, because this could have massive effects on Brexit, exactly what you're saying, because if the people who have been living here for a long time are suddenly told they need to produce evidence of employment or tax status or, you know, whatever, if they can't cope with the Windrush people, which was a few hundred thousand, how are they going to cope with 3.whatever million people?
Well, do you do what Boris Johnson says and have an amnesty?
Well,
that wouldn't cover them.
No,
it wouldn't cover them.
But I mean, the key point from you, from what you said, Greg, we could be left in total crisis. Well, we could. But then again, you could say that they might learn from this utter shambles that has been Windrush.
Yeah, I doubt it.
We just don't know.
It was revealed yesterday.
But you would have to change the whole culture that has grown up at the Home Office. That's the problem. That actually, I mean, I feel a bit sorry for Amber Rudd, because I think Theresa... This is all Theresa May.
She knew about it in 2016.
Yes, but
she knew about it last year.
Under Theresa May's watch. But these are Theresa May's policies.
Yeah, but she's not.
It's terrible.
She's not the Home Secretary. Amber Rudd is, and this.
But the problem started under Theresa May, and I think it's terrible that
they knew about it last year, and they knew about it in 2014.
For everything that Theresa May created, as David Lammy said in the comments last week. Theresa May created.
Well, are you saying that Theresa May was wrong to clamp down on the illegal people who were in this country in 2014? This is the key, because she wasn't wrong to do it.
But the fact is, those people were not illegal.
No, I know, but the Labour Party...
We're not talking about Windrush people.
But the fact that that policy has impacted people it shouldn't have...
Yes, it should have.
What a
Absolutely
mess it was.
right.
Anyway, can we have a look at Amber? She had a bit of a terrible time with Yvette Cooper.
Yeah, she did.
We don't have targets for removals, but you did. I don't know what are you referring to.
We've just heard from the previous evidence that the Home Office and there are regional targets for net removals.
I didn't hear the testimony. I'm not sure what shape that might be in. But if you're asking me are the numbers of people we expect to be removed, that's not how we operate.
I think, Greg, everything you've said has just been summed up there.
Can I just...
If the person in charge doesn't have a clue what's going on, what hope have we got?
Can I just underscore a point
that
Carol made? Hostile to illegal immigration. You do agree with cracking down on illegal immigration. No, can I just clarify that?
I agree with cracking down on illegal immigration.
And
you have to be careful how you do it, because you know what? It then impacts anybody who is seen as different.
That was their mistake.
That's the problem with what's going on.
It didn't purposely impact on them. They just didn't realise.
But it still impacted on them.
Yes, I know it did. And
that's why you have to think this stuff through.
It was a very unintended consequence to that policy change.
Yes,
wasn't it?
Still.
And she was right, because at the time in 2014 when she changed the laws, there were thought to be 1 million illegal immigrants in this country. Immigration itself was running at 300,000, and the illegal figure was increasing by 70,000 a year. So she had to do something.
But what's clear is they have no idea what an illegal immigrant is.
Is, actually.
I mean, that's the interesting thing about this. They have no idea. Because here you've got, you know, I was brought in by my dad, and I was 3, and I've never really registered for anything. And I'm now going to be... And I was being...
But of course, they never... The Windrush generation never needed paperwork. They didn't need to be legally registered here. And that only changed...
They were already citizens.
And that only changed when the immigration...
All right, but come the EU discussion...
Yeah.
It's exactly the same again. I'll go along and say, I came here 4 years ago, so I'm allowed to. So I'm allowed to.
As we've mentioned Windrush, we need to hear what the Home Secretary Amber Rudd has said on this, and I quote, "It is only right that the significant contribution the Windrush generation have made to the UK is recognised. That is why I want to ensure they can acquire the status they deserve, British citizenship, quickly, at no cost, and with proactive assistance through the process. It is also why I want to make sure we set up a compensation scheme that works in the best interests of those affected," Home Secretary Amber Rudd. Greg, you've very accurately and succinctly highlighted the problem, and you're undoubtedly right, but what is the solution?
Oh, I don't know.
OK, it's not your job, by the way, you're not Home Sec.
No, but it's not only that, and I think it's... I don't know. I mean, if you've got... Changing culture in organisations is very difficult, and it might be you've got to stop taking away from the Home Office and give it to...
So do you buy... There's everyone in the Home... This is almost like my police debate.
I don't buy that everybody in the Home Office is racist.
Right.
What I will... Or anything like it.
No,
I don't think at all.
all.
What I do buy is that there are cultures in organisation, and... Certainly since the coalition government first came in, and now in the period of the Tory government, that their determination to reduce immigration figures, net immigration, so in other words, get some out, get some... the determination has created a culture.
And to be fair to the people in the Home Office, and I don't particularly want to be, but they did say that they produced a document in 2015 which warned about the Windrush generation. It said that the immigration laws could impact on people here who were lawfully settled. And that's what happened. But Amber Rudd did say, didn't she say last week, that the people in the Home Office were treating the Windrush generation not like forgetting that there were human beings with lives, and that's true. We're treating them like numbers, and that's exactly what's happened.
A statement from Guy Verhofstadt, who is the Brexit coordinator for the European Parliament, and this is what he had to say. After the Windrush scandal, there was a lot, and there still is, a lot of anxiety over our EU citizens living in Britain. And they could have the same experience in their future. And I think it's true. I think we are going to see so much confusion.
But then has he got a solution for how he's going to manage the UK citizens living overseas? What he's going to do? Because what I have a problem with this is he's all very quick to come out and highlight and raise problems at this side of the fence. But he's going to have this same problem on their side of the fence. So I'd be really interested to see how he's going to manage that.
We could talk about this. We've got to go. We've got to go. We've got to go to break. You're watching The Pledge on Sky News. Up next, I'm saying Meghan's choice of wedding guests might show what we can expect from the Duchess in waiting. Welcome back. In that now famous engagement interview, Meghan Markle made it clear she was incredibly proud of who she is and where she came from. And as we've heard since, she comes from a massive extended family. So why, say for her mum and dad, has she reportedly not invited any of them to her wedding? Is she ashamed of them? Is she trying to erase the past and people that don't fit with her glitzy new royal life? Because if the reports are true, that's what it's looking like. Over 2,500 members of the public, strangers, have been invited to the wedding, but Meghan's family apparently haven't made the cut. This despite the couple saying they wouldn't be inviting politicians and heads of state because their wedding was going to be all about family and friends. Just not Meghan's family. I'm sorry, but this is starting to look like a statement wedding. Not of who Meghan is and where she came from, but who she wants to be and where she's going. The author, Andrew Morton, claims that when she was a rising star, Meghan just expunged people she held dear in order to elevate her social and professional status. Is that what she's doing here? Expunging a family she's now ashamed of?
Enough reportedly and allegedlys in there, were there, Carol? There are quite a few.
Yes.
Yeah, I counted at least.
I
think you're on an island here. I think you're on your own. I think the great British public are, broadly speaking, I won't say in love with her, but hugely supportive of her.
Yeah,
I think you would be supportive of if there's a family wedding. I don't see why the groom and or the bride should have to invite family that she doesn't or he doesn't really like. I think it's an extraordinary situation that you have to have family members that maybe you don't get on with.
Why do you think it's extraordinary? It's perfectly normal. It's what happens.
Because, well, I know. I mean, I have attended weddings, and we'll go around the room, we'll go around the table. I have attended weddings where family members have not my family, but other family, because they know there's bad blood, and that is dramatic. Now, we don't even hang on, Carol. We don't even know if there is bad blood, and quite rightly, and as a journalist, I knew you'd do that. We don't yet know. We haven't yet got the official list. But this idea that Andrew Morton, who again a journalist, same sort of calibre as us guys, expunged people. Is this what we see? I think those are words that sit very, very poorly with how British people regard this woman. I think it's a breath of fresh air. Let's see the list, and if the girl doesn't want Uncle Sid or whoever it is, so be it.
I think it's very odd in a wedding where you have one part of the couple and there's scores of nieces and nephews and aunties and uncles and whatever, and on the other side you have mum and dad. And for a while there we didn't actually think her dad was going to come at one point because Wills was going to give her away.
Never been to a wedding where Auntie Joan hasn't been involved?
I've never ever been to a wedding where there was only two members of one person's family and 580, 90 of the other family.
Well, first of all, when I heard you were doing this topic, I was so confused because, number one, what business is it of yours who Meghan Markle...
You can't possibly say that. It's a very public wedding.
No.
They're allowing it to be televised. It is for the nation.
If Meghan Markle... Why have you got any say in who she decides to invite to her own wedding? At the end of the day...
I'm saying I think it's odd, June, that two members of her family are coming to a wedding where there are 600 invited guests and 2,500 members of the public.
My point is...
Reportedly.
Exactly. My point is, at the end of the day, she knows why. Yeah. Nobody knows what goes on in
and I'd quite like to know why.
And actually,
what's it to do with you?
But you know what I think? I think she's made a huge mistake because let me tell you why I think she has. Let me explain. Because I think all the family members who are upset at not being invited, trust me, some newspaper or some TV station will bring them over here. And I think she might as well have just invited them and put them on a table in a corner because
she should be frightened of the papers? That's ridiculous. I would deliberately not invite more people.
Her relatives are already saying so. But better to have those people on the inside peeing out, can I say that, rather than on the outside peeing.
If you have people... OK, let's even forget for a minute that they are family. If you have people in your life that there was a time you were once close to, but you haven't seen them in over a decade...
But it's all of her family. It's not just the odd member. It's all of them, reportedly.
Let's just have a look at this clip from Prince Harry.
She's done an absolutely amazing job, just getting in there, and it's the family that I suppose she's never had.
So, it's clearly she doesn't get on with a large chunk of her family.
All of them.
Fine, that's her choice. I mean, you seem to think that this is somehow, because it's going to be on the telly, it's a public event.
Yeah. Well, it is a public event.
Everybody should be invited.
It is a public event.
Somebody getting married are entitled to... When I got married for the second time, the only people I invited were my kids, because I was marrying their mother.
Yeah. Slightly different situation, Greg.
Is it televised publicly?
I think people will wonder why all of her family reportedly...
normal people don't. They don't.
Yes, they do, because the papers have been full of the relatives.
Can I ask one question? When you were getting married, who did your wedding list? For your invites, for your guests?
Actually, you just kind of dropped me in there because there was only 5 people at my wedding.
I rest my case.
There we go. You didn't invite Auntie Joan.
But do you know what we did? We got married in a registry office. Then we had a big party. That's what we did.
Yeah, but
do you think I'm nuts on this?
Go on, Michelle.
I couldn't care less who goes to the wedding.
Well, try. Involve yourself.
But if I try and care, you mentioned that... You're mentioning stuff like there's family members that are all being hurt, and, there's an uncle who's apparently really hurt that he's not been invited.
There's 2 uncles.
Yes, but then the uncle, the best he can muster is going, I'm really hurt because 17 years ago I helped Meghan get a job.
Oh,
I am funny, but if you're a decent uncle and
this is her dad's brother, and there are 2 brothers the father has. One is a very respected...
you know it, don't you?
One is a very respected bishop. The other one is the guy you're talking about, a retired US diplomat. Why wouldn't you have those people?
Because she doesn't want them, and that's her choice.
But maybe it is her choice. But I think there's just something odd in the background.
Isn't this journalism at its worst.
No, it is not.
It is.
No,
It's
it isn't.
I could get a lot worse.
Yeah, yes, there is worse, but this is journalism at its worst. It's basically you as a journalist trying to find a story by finding somebody who's not coming to it and you're saying this is outrageous.
Well, no, it's not me saying that, Greg. I've been reading the papers.
Well, who else
Lots
is
of
it?
people
so
are
other
writing about
journalists.
this,
I don't think
saying
so.
how weird and odd this happened.
Carol.
Listen, I don't doubt for a fact she's kind and compassionate. I see the fact she's done incredible work to fight racism. I get all of that.
And
but I just,
many other things
But what I
too,
think
not
she,
just
what
that.
I think she also
Well, we can look at a clip in a second
yeah,
of
go on,
some of
Michelle.
the...
I'd like to see that.
Yeah, let's have a look at a clip of, you know,
Oh,
people
now what's this
talking about
of?
the wonderful work that she does.
One day she approached me and talked about how, as a young student, she had served on Skid Row, but was very, very frightened by the experience. She felt that she had done a lot of good, but she was very, very scared to go back. And so she asked me if I could suggest a way that she could return to service on Skid Row.
You lucky people, I've just given you an exclusive glimpse there. I don't know if you've noticed of a programme that's coming up. Harry and Meghan.
Meghan. You're sacked.
Meghan, the love story. See, for people like you that are interested in behind the scenes.
I just think a woman who was kind and compassionate to the rest of the world, it just seems a bit odd to me that she's not showing the same kindness to her.
Well, she might not get on with them.
Not a crime.
Not
entitled to do that.
Family.
But the point that Andrew Morton and others are making is that on her way up to stardom, Meghan has cut people out that don't fit
Allegedly.
Allegedly, with her royal life.
And
this,
you're still in touch with every single
yes.
person.
This looks
as
to
you made
me
your way successfully from the Journal.
I didn't.
You've
I
cut
didn't.
everybody off.
Well, I didn't.
Sorry, you've stayed in touch with everybody.
Well,
God, you haven't.
so
Neither
for
have
lots
I.
of people,
Neither have I.
yes.
Neither. I don't even like them. I didn't like them then, and I like them
But
less
that's
now.
more to do with you than me.
I think secretly you're upset because you're not on the invite.
I think that's what it is.
That's
You want
what
it to
I
be
think.
part of this 1,200
My
brigade.
super vet, Noel Fitzpatrick, is going. He's on the list.
Oh, really?
I don't
Anyway, look, we've come to the end of the show, but before we do, it's time for our Straight Talker of the Week. Now, there are more statues of men called John in the whole of the UK than there are of historical female figures. It was about time that somebody did something about it. Cue campaigner Caroline Credo-Perez, whose 2-year battle to get a tribute to a woman alongside the 11 male statues in Parliament Square finally paid off this week. Suffragist Millicent Fawcett worked tirelessly to pave the way for equality between the sexes. But as Theresa May reminded us, the battle isn't quite won yet.
It is all too easy to forget those who forged a path for generations of women to follow, to take for granted the progress that they achieved through years, decades of bitter struggle. We do so at our peril, because the fight for equality is far from won. And as long as that is the case, we will need brave women and men to stand up and speak out in the face of injustice and discrimination.
Well, we know our Prime Minister has had a difficult week, but we agree with you on this one. Hear, hear, Prime Minister, you are our Straight Talker of the Week. That's it for this week, but you can join the debate by searching The Pledge on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks for watching. Bye.